I've been doing what I do. I've been lecturing since the early 1980s. And in my country, the buzz, you know, for a lot of the 1980s and into the 90s was dysfunctional. We just wanted to not be dysfunctional. That was our goal, was just to not be dysfunctional. And when people got to the point where they were no longer throwing up after meals and no longer drug addicted or being able to stay in a relationship, people thought, well, that's it. And when 9/11 happened, there was a great awakening, at least in my country, that we were called upon to grow up at last. And I'm not saying that in the United States we know what to do, and I think that the behavior of our government is a clear enough sign of that. But what I see in the United States that I know enough to know has nothing to do with the United States, but has to do with the state of humanity, is that while we do not quite know what to do yet, the fact that a critical mass of people are not turning away from the question, are not turning away from the challenge to do whatever it is that we need to do to change the human race, makes this moment a pregnant one and a fertile one. If you do not look at the deeper problems, you are not in transcendence, you are in denial. And yet if all you do is to look at the deeper problems, you become at the effect of the problem. And so there is a way to dwell within the problem with a consciousness of hope. In the Talmud it says, during the darkest night, act as if the morning has already come. The night before the crucifixion, Jesus said, and by the way, I'm sure you probably have already noted, I speak mainly from the traditions of Buddhism and Judaism and Christianity, simply because those are the traditions that I know enough about. I was in Dubai recently, and I came away knowing that in order to be a conscious person on the planet today, I absolutely must learn more about Islam, and I'm trying. But in the meantime, the fact that I don't know its tenets well enough to use it as part of a public talk, please know that that in no way represents any prejudice on my part that thought that there is any less wisdom there than in any of the other great religious teachings of the world. As a student of the Course in Miracles, I believe that there are universal spiritual themes in all the great religious teachings of the world. And I believe that they are all a message from a divine source. So I think that if I tell a message from any one religious tradition, I'm sure those who know more about all the other religious traditions could tell basically the same story from another place. There is a story in the New Testament, the night before the crucifixion, in which Jesus said to the disciples who were falling asleep, "What? Could you not remain awake with me 1 hour?" The idea which I mentioned before about remaining awake in the hour of humanity's agony. And yet, if you remain awake in the hour of humanity's agony, there is by definition a temptation to go to sleep because, as we said before, it is so painful. And yet, by being willing to bear witness, this, according to Mahatma Gandhi, of itself creates moral force. And that moral force becomes a political and social force if we allow it to. Dr. Martin Luther King, who traveled to India, studied Gandhian principles, brought them back, applied them to the struggle for civil rights in the United States in the 1960s, said that Gandhi was the first person in human history to take an ethic of love and turn it into a broad-scale social and political force. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I cannot imagine a kind of, sort of, casually, when it's convenient, committed terrorist. Every time there is an act of terrorism, world leaders such as my own stand up and say, this cowardly act will not be tolerated. And every time I hear an act of terrorism, as it is often done by our leaders, defined or described as cowardly, I tilt my head. I can go with evil, unconscionable, wicked. I can go with a lot of descriptions, but I can't quite go with cowardly. The truth of the matter is that hatred has a perverse kind of courage. Now, conversely, I have known many people, and I know that I myself am one sometimes, kind of, sort of, casually, when it's convenient, committed to love. But, as the Course in Miracles says, miracles arise from conviction. The greatest power to change the world, as Martin Luther King said, we have a power within us more powerful than the power of bullets. The greatest power to change the world lies not in military might, lies not in technology, lies not in money or in government. It lies in the human conviction that we must and we will. Now, what is happening on the planet at this time is that obviously, among the billions of people in this world, the vast majority of people on this planet are decent people who just want to live and let live. That is so clear. The vast majority of people on this earth just want a roof over their head, they want food to eat, they want to be able to raise their children with those things and live a nice life. So why is it that a relatively small group of human beings in various parts of the world and in various ways, with what is ultimately a kind of regressive fear-based and in sometimes hate-filled consciousness, are holding the entire human race hostage? Well, for one thing, it is because they demonstrate greater conviction. And those who hate, look at the phenomenon of terrorism. You see in the phenomenon of terrorism people who are willing to literally die for the cause, to do anything, to train. How many of us train to live greater lives of love? Most of us love where it's convenient and where it is relatively easy. And I also think that it is true for many in our generation that while we would like a complete and fundamental revolution of the values that rule the world, we basically like to make this happen over white wine and brie. Just do it. I mean, it is unbelievable how once you start actively having peace meetings, once you actually start doing meetings and having talks and the kinds of things that could actually make a difference in the community, how many people start calling and saying, can't we do the meeting at 4? I really need to pick up my child at soccer. Could we do it at 4 instead of 7? It's unbelievable how little consciousness and awareness we have sometimes that this will not happen without work. And I don't know I cannot speak about other countries because I think you have to be within a system to know anything about it. But I believe that part is what has happened in the United States, and no matter what country we come from, we know that where the United States stands, for better or for worse, has a great effect on the earth. We have been damaged by the ease of our lifestyle. And so there is a weakness that has set in. Now, I have faith in my fellow human beings, and I have faith in my own countrymen, that I believe that there is a critical mass of people in my country, as elsewhere, that something's got to change, that I believe we will get over this hurdle. However, in my country, and in perhaps yours, for those of you who do not come from the United States, it is helpful to remember that whether you're talking about the women suffragettes in the United States, the abolitionists in the United States, the Indian independence movement, or any great social injustice movement anywhere in the world, it was carried out without faxes, without cell phones, without technology of any kind. The greatest movements in human history did not rely upon external power of any kind. It relied upon a level of conviction and willingness within human beings to do whatever it took. And from a metaphysical perspective, Dr. Martin Luther King said the arc of justice is long, but he said the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. So what does this mean for us? What does it mean for us as individuals? First of all, I read a book by my colleague and friend Daphne Rose Kingma, in which she pointed out what it is that makes a little chick know that it's time to start pecking its way out of an egg.